The phone call was recorded at 11:47 p.m., and what Jennifer Gledhill said next would seal her fate forever. In an instant, the facade of a perfect family crumbled. The woman who had been a caring mother, a devoted wife, was now at the center of a horrifying crime. Her voice, calm and seemingly composed, betrayed nothing of the dark truth she was hiding. What could drive a mother of three, seemingly so ordinary, to commit such a horrific act? What did she say that evening that would lead to her arrest and a story that would shake the community to its core? Jennifer's phone call would be the beginning of a twisted tale, one filled with deception, betrayal, and ultimately, murder. But before we get to that moment, let's take a step back and look at the perfect life Jennifer and her husband Matthew appeared to have built. $1 million home in a quiet Utah neighborhood, 3 children and a family everyone admired. Yet beneath the picture-perfect surface, something far darker was lurking. Join us as we unravel the shocking true crime story of Jennifer Gledhill and the chilling betrayal that changed everything. On September 28, 2024, Jennifer Gledhill called the police to report her husband, Matthew Johnson, missing. The police were told that Matthew had vanished without a trace, leaving behind no clues as to his whereabouts. He had simply disappeared. For Jennifer, this was the beginning of a nightmare that would only worsen as the days went on. Matthew, a 51-year-old military man, had served in the Utah National Guard's 19th Special Forces Group as a Green Beret. He was a highly respected member of his community, known for his courage and dedication to his country. To those who knew him, he was the definition of a devoted father, a reliable husband, and a trusted friend. But those who knew him best were unaware of the turmoil brewing at home. Jennifer, 42, was often seen as the perfect military wife, dedicated, nurturing, and deeply involved in her children's lives. She was known for her calm demeanor, her devotion to her family, and her warm, welcoming nature. Together, Matthew and Jennifer had built what appeared to be an idyllic life for their 3 young children, 2 boys, aged 11 and 7, and a 5-year-old girl. But behind the scenes, things were far from perfect. Like many couples, Jennifer and Matthew had faced their share of challenges. But what no one knew was that their marriage had begun to unravel months earlier. Court documents and interviews would later reveal that the couple had been considering divorce since the summer of 2024. In July, Jennifer had even gone as far as filing for a temporary protective order against Matthew, claiming she needed protection from him. The case was dismissed by a judge who found that Jennifer's evidence was questionable at best. The cracks in their relationship were becoming evident, but no one could have predicted just how far Jennifer would go to escape the marriage. As tensions continued to rise, Jennifer filed for divorce, but things had already gone beyond saving. Jennifer's behavior had become increasingly erratic, and Matthew began to fear for his safety. Friends of the family noted that he started spending more time away from home, staying at a National Guard facility to avoid the escalating conflict. But even with all these signs pointing to a relationship on the verge of collapse, no one could have anticipated the horrific choice Jennifer would make. Behind the walls of their $1 million home, Jennifer was living a double life. While publicly trying to maintain the image of a perfect wife and mother, she was secretly having an affair, a relationship, that would become the catalyst for a murder that would forever alter the lives of her children and a community that thought they knew her. In the days leading up to September 20th, 2024, Jennifer's actions would lead to a confrontation with her husband, one that would escalate into a fatal decision, a marriage in turmoil, a woman on the edge, and a family about to be destroyed. Jennifer and Matthew Johnson seemed to have it all. They were the picture of the perfect American family. A beautiful home in the quiet upscale neighborhood of Cottonwood Heights, Utah. 3 young children, 2 boys, ages 11 and 7, and a little girl, just 5, who were full of life and energy. The family lived in a sprawling million-dollar house with manicured lawns and a two-car garage, surrounded by neighbors who envied the calm perfection that radiated from the Johnson household. The couple's life seemed as flawless as the pristine house they had built together. To the outside world, they appeared to be a stable, loving family. Matthew, a devoted father and husband, and Jennifer, the ideal military wife who was always supportive, nurturing, and involved in her children's lives. The family appeared as though nothing could break their bond. Matthew, at 51, was a highly respected member of the Utah National Guard's 19th Special Forces Group. A Green Beret with over a decade of military service, he was revered for his bravery, loyalty, and intellect. He was a man who had earned the trust and admiration of everyone around him, from his fellow soldiers to the neighbors who knew him as a reliable, friendly presence. He was a man who, to many, had the world at his feet. Jennifer, 42, had built a life around her family. She was the epitome of a dedicated wife and mother, the kind of woman who made her family her top priority, attending school events, managing the home, and supporting Matthew's demanding career. She was often described as warm and kind, someone who would invite neighbors in for coffee, always wearing a smile, and making those around her feel comfortable. Together, Matthew and Jennifer created a life that looked enviable, one that many would dream of, a family full of love, stability, and success. But what people didn't know was that this image was just a mask, a carefully constructed front that hid the emotional turmoil and dysfunction that was slowly eating away at the foundation of their marriage. As time went on, however, cracks began to appear in their seemingly perfect life. Behind closed doors, the perfect family started to unravel. The first signs of trouble appeared as early as the summer of 2024. According to court documents, Matthew and Jennifer had begun to talk seriously about divorce, a topic that would have been unthinkable for anyone who knew them. Jennifer had been filing for temporary protective orders against Matthew, claiming she feared for her safety. But when the case went before the court, it quickly became clear that the evidence Jennifer presented was far from convincing. A judge dismissed her claims, finding that the videos she submitted actually showed her behaving in a way that was confrontational rather than fearful. Text messages between the couple revealed a history of verbal altercations, with Jennifer often berating Matthew, belittling him, and at times even goading him into an angry response. These revelations suggested that the family dynamics were far more complicated than anyone had imagined. The protective order was just the beginning of the cracks that were starting to widen in their marriage. In a series of chilling exchanges between Jennifer and Matthew, it was revealed that their relationship had been deteriorating for months. What started as subtle tension soon escalated into much darker territory. Jennifer's increasingly erratic behavior and her repeated attempts to provoke Matthew created a toxic environment, and friends and family began to notice the change in their dynamic. Matthew, once a proud and reliable military man, was no longer his usual self. He started staying away from home more, spending time at a National Guard facility rather than being in the house where the atmosphere had become unbearable. His friends said that he seemed withdrawn and on edge, perhaps sensing that things had gone far beyond the point of reconciliation. What Matthew didn't know, however, was that his wife, the woman he thought he knew, had already begun a secret affair, a betrayal that would ultimately lead to the horrifying tragedy that no one could have predicted. Matthew, despite his best efforts to hold the family together, could not have foreseen the devastating lengths Jennifer was willing to go to in order to escape the marriage. The affair, which she kept hidden from him, would become the key to unraveling the mystery of what had been happening behind the scenes. But for now, Matthew was in the dark, trying desperately to save a marriage that had already slipped beyond his grasp. By the time Jennifer filed for divorce, it was already too late. The destruction had already begun, and what would follow would change the course of their lives forever. The cracks in their relationship had become irreparable, and despite all of their efforts to maintain appearances, the facade would come crashing down, leading to a horrific end. The tragic reality was that the perfect family was just that, a perfect illusion, and now it was about to shatter. As Matthew and Jennifer's marriage crumbled behind closed doors, a dark secret began to take shape, one that would soon turn deadly. While Matthew tried to save his relationship, Jennifer had already emotionally checked out. She had found someone else. The affair began quietly, at first with innocent messages and late-night conversations, but it quickly evolved into something much more serious. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment or a passing distraction. It was a full-blown double life. Jennifer had fallen deeply into an affair with another man, a relationship that became obsessive and consuming. Her lover later told investigators that she spoke to him constantly, confiding in him about her unhappiness and portraying herself as a victim trapped in an unloving marriage. To him, she was someone misunderstood and mistreated, a woman who just wanted to escape. But to those closest to Matthew, the truth was far different. She wasn't a victim. She was planning something unthinkable. As the affair continued, Jennifer became more distant from her family. Friends and neighbors would later recall that she no longer appeared to be the devoted mother she once was. She started disappearing for hours at a time, claiming errands or work obligations. Her text messages became secretive and her demeanor changed. The woman who had once seemed warm and polite had grown cold, detached, and short-tempered. Meanwhile, Matthew had started to sense that something was off. He confided in a close friend, saying that Jennifer's behavior had become unpredictable and erratic. He had found evidence of her affair, and their once peaceful home became a battleground filled with tension and resentment. Still, Matthew was not prepared to believe that Jennifer would ever harm him. The idea that the mother of his children could pose a danger to him never crossed his mind. But Jennifer's relationship with her lover had taken a dark turn. The emotional affair had become her escape from reality, a world where she felt in control again. Yet to maintain that fantasy, one obstacle stood in her way: her husband. In early September 2024, just days before the tragedy, Jennifer began to put her deadly plan into motion. She was methodical, deliberate, and coldly calculated. Investigators would later uncover a chilling timeline that revealed just how far she went to prepare for her husband's murder. She had purchased a Glock 19X handgun, the same weapon she would later use to kill Matthew. On September 19th, 2 days before the murder, she showed the loaded gun to her lover, casually displaying it as though it were nothing more than a household item. He would later tell police that he thought nothing of it at the time, assuming that, as a military family, owning firearms was normal. But that moment would later become a haunting memory, the warning sign he failed to see. Jennifer's plan extended beyond the weapon. She arranged for her 3 children to stay overnight at her parents' house on September 20th. This was not a coincidence. It was a calculated move to ensure that the children would not be home when she carried out the killing. Every step was carefully thought out, every detail premeditated. At home, Matthew had discovered the affair. On the night of September 20th, witnesses later reported hearing an argument between the couple. It was intense, emotional, and loud enough for neighbors to notice. The confrontation was the breaking point. Jennifer knew she could no longer keep up her double life. To her, the only way out was to eliminate Matthew entirely. That night she waited for him to fall asleep. As he lay in bed, unaware of the danger, Jennifer made her move. She took the 9mm handgun, his own weapon, and pulled the trigger. The bullet struck Matthew in the head, killing him instantly. What followed was not panic or remorse, but a chilling calmness. Jennifer began the process of covering up her crime. She dragged Matthew's body, placing it into a rooftop storage container, and moved it down the stairs. She cleaned the bedroom using bleach and carpet cleaner, and later ordered a brand new mattress to replace the one soaked with blood. Then she loaded his body into the family van and drove away into the night. It was an execution carried out with precision and control, the act of someone who had planned every step. By morning, she was gone, and so was Matthew. In the days that followed, Jennifer tried to maintain the illusion that nothing had happened. She texted friends, attended to daily routines, and continued her contact with her lover as though life were normal. But inside, the web she had woven was beginning to collapse. Her affair, once a thrilling escape, had now become the source of her undoing. The very man she had confided in would soon become the key witness against her. It was her own words, her own actions, and her own confession that would expose the full depth of her deception. The affair that began as a secret passion had transformed into a motive for murder, one that would destroy not only her husband's life, but also her own. And as the investigation would soon reveal, every lie Jennifer told was about to unravel. By the evening of September 20th, 2024, the simmering tensions between Jennifer and Matthew had reached their breaking point. The night started like any other, just a few days before what would become the deadliest moment of their troubled marriage. But behind the closed doors of their million-dollar home, everything was about to unravel. The affair that Jennifer had been hiding from Matthew had been discovered. He knew, and now it was time to confront her. What followed was a confrontation full of raw emotion, anger, and years of pent-up frustration that would ultimately lead to violence. Neighbors later recalled hearing raised voices coming from the Johnson household late that night. Matthew confronted Jennifer about her affair, demanding answers. According to later testimonies, the argument quickly escalated, with Matthew shouting at her in disbelief. How could she betray him like this? How could she destroy everything they had built? Jennifer, on the other hand, defended herself, but her demeanor had changed. No longer the calm and composed woman she once was, she fought back with a venomous edge. She berated Matthew, insulting him in ways that were deeply personal. The cruelty in her words matched the contempt she had been hiding all along. This wasn't just a marital dispute, it was the culmination of months of emotional turmoil, a relationship that had long been fractured. Friends later described Matthew as a man who rarely raised his voice. He was known for his calm and collected nature, especially under pressure. But that night his trust had been shattered. He was desperate for answers, for closure, and perhaps for some form of redemption. But Jennifer, at that moment, was beyond redemption. She no longer cared for the marriage. Her eyes were focused on her escape, on a life that didn't involve Matthew. And in that moment, the emotional conflict escalated into something far more dangerous. What happened next is still unclear. Some witnesses say Matthew had come to the conclusion that a divorce was inevitable, and perhaps he even tried to reconcile. But Jennifer, in her fury, turned the tables. Words were exchanged, and things spiraled out of control. What started as a conversation about betrayal and broken promises would end in an irreversible act of violence. The exact words and actions are lost to time, but the result was clear. Matthew would never have the chance to walk away from this fight. As the argument reached its peak, Jennifer knew exactly what her next step would be. In the early hours of September 21st, 2024, as Matthew lay asleep in their master bedroom, unaware of what was about to happen, Jennifer made her decision. She reached for the 9mm handgun that Matthew kept beside their bed. The weapon was familiar to both of them, a tool of protection that had once been used to keep their family safe. But tonight it would be used for murder. As Matthew slept, Jennifer approached him and shot him in the head while he was completely vulnerable. The shot was precise, leaving no room for escape. The murder of Matthew Johnson was not an act of passion or a spur-of-the-moment crime. No, Jennifer's actions in the aftermath made it clear she had thought this through. The cold efficiency with which she carried out the cover-up is chilling. It wasn't just about killing her husband. It was about erasing every trace of her involvement, creating a story that would convince the world she had done nothing wrong. This wasn't a crime of opportunity, it was calculated, planned, and cold-hearted. Once Matthew was dead, Jennifer didn't panic. She didn't scream or cry for help. Instead, she methodically carried out the steps she had already planned. First, she dragged Matthew's lifeless body from their bed and placed it in a rooftop storage container. This wasn't a quick or easy task, but Jennifer was determined. She then moved the body down the stairs, a chilling act of detachment that hinted at just how much she had already detached herself from the reality of what she had done. Jennifer's next move was equally deliberate. She drove Matthew's truck to a nearby neighborhood and abandoned it, making sure it would be far enough from their home to confuse any investigation. Then, with her husband's body in the van, she drove north, looking for the perfect spot to dispose of him. She buried Matthew's body in a shallow grave, a location that remains unknown to this day, and returned home as though nothing had happened. But the work didn't stop there. She still had to erase the evidence. Back at the house, Jennifer set to work cleaning up the crime scene. She used bleach and carpet cleaner to scrub away the bloodstains that had soaked into the carpet. The walls, too, were stained with blood, but Jennifer was thorough, using every tool at her disposal to hide the truth. The most chilling part of the cover-up, however, was the new mattress. Just days after the murder, Jennifer ordered a replacement for the blood-soaked mattress, ensuring that the bed where Matthew had been killed would be completely replaced. The mattress arrived only 2 days later, fresh and clean, just as Jennifer hoped the crime scene would appear to anyone investigating. But Jennifer's most critical mistake was yet to come. Despite her careful planning, her need for secrecy, and the cold precision of her actions, she underestimated one key thing: the people around her. Her lover, the man she had been confiding in, had grown terrified by what he had heard and seen. On September 22nd, just 1 day after Matthew's body was buried, Jennifer made a grave error in judgment. She went to her lover's home and confessed everything. She told him how she had killed Matthew, how she had disposed of his body, and how she had cleaned the house to cover up the crime. He was horrified by her confession. The woman he had been seeing, the woman he thought he knew, had just admitted to cold-blooded murder. But what made it even more chilling was her demeanor. She spoke casually, as though she were recounting an everyday event. She wasn't upset, she wasn't remorseful, she was calm, detached, and eerily composed. It was almost as though the man she had married, the father of her children, had never been a person at all. Jennifer's lover was so disturbed by what he had learned that he decided to record their next phone conversation. When he asked her if she would be scared if the situation were reversed, Jennifer replied with an unnerving lack of fear. Her response was chilling. "Not if I deserved it." The coldness in her voice would become one of the most damning pieces of evidence against her. Jennifer's calmness in the aftermath of her husband's murder, the meticulous cover-up, and her chilling confession marked the beginning of her unraveling. While she thought she had erased all traces of her crime, the truth was about to come to light. The web she had woven was starting to collapse, and soon it would all come crashing down. As the days passed, Jennifer's life began to unravel. The story she had carefully constructed, her husband's sudden disappearance, and the supposed abandonment of their family, was beginning to crumble. On September 28th, just days after Jennifer had reported Matthew missing, the police began their investigation. At first, Jennifer's story seemed plausible. Matthew had been a respected soldier, and the idea that he had just up and left was not entirely out of the question. However, as detectives began digging deeper into his life and the circumstances surrounding his disappearance, they quickly began to notice inconsistencies. Jennifer's behavior raised suspicion from the very beginning. She was cool under pressure, almost too calm for someone who had just lost a husband. She didn't seem to be emotionally distressed. Her responses were rehearsed, almost robotic. When detectives searched the family home, they found evidence that contradicted her account. Bloodstains were found on the carpet and walls in the master bedroom where Matthew had been killed. The sight was disturbing. These were no small traces, but substantial amounts of blood, indicating a violent struggle. Further investigation revealed even more telling clues. The carpet in the bedroom had been cleaned with bleach, but the evidence was still clear. The smell of bleach was overpowering, and the pattern of the bloodstains suggested someone had been dragged or moved. The investigators also found that Jennifer had ordered a new mattress on September 24th, just days after Matthew's murder, which arrived a few days later. The old mattress, stained with blood, was gone, replaced with a fresh one. But perhaps the most damning evidence came from Jennifer's phone records and GPS data. Police discovered that Jennifer's phone had been active in multiple locations that seemed suspicious. The data showed her traveling to a neighborhood where Matthew's truck had been abandoned. She then drove north toward Davis County, the very area where she had later confessed to burying his body. Jennifer had tried to erase every trace of her crime, but technology told a different story. As the investigation unfolded, Jennifer's lies began to unravel. The police had also spoken to her lover, who had recorded their phone conversations, revealing Jennifer's chilling confession. It was the lover's testimony, coupled with the evidence found at the crime scene, that finally led to Jennifer's arrest. On October 2nd, 2024, she was taken into custody and charged with first-degree murder and obstruction of justice. But even as she was arrested, one mystery remained. Where was Matthew's body? The search for Matthew's body continued for months, with law enforcement and volunteers scouring multiple counties across northern Utah. The search effort was massive, but despite their best efforts, Matthew's remains were never recovered. Over 70 searchers combed through remote areas, including Boxelder County, near the Utah-Idaho border, and other locations Jennifer had indicated. His body remained elusive, buried somewhere in the vast wilderness. The uncertainty surrounding his final resting place only added to the heartbreak his family had to endure. As they continued their search, one thing was certain. Jennifer had not just stolen a life, she had left a void that could never be filled. While Jennifer's arrest was the climax of the investigation, it wasn't the end of the story. As the investigation progressed, law enforcement turned their attention to Jennifer's parents, Thomas and Rosalie Gledhill. Both had been in and out of the house during the days following Matthew's murder, and their involvement would soon come under scrutiny. It was revealed that Thomas and Rosalie had spent more than 5 hours at Jennifer's house in late September, despite initially telling authorities that they had only stayed for about an hour to pick up clothes. The extended visit raised suspicions. When questioned, Thomas inadvertently revealed knowledge of the crime scene, telling investigators that he had not gone into the room where the incident had occurred. This comment, made under pressure, suggested that he knew far more than he should. Further investigation uncovered even more troubling evidence. Rosalie, Jennifer's mother, had purchased the new mattress and was found to have had her phone remotely wiped during the critical period when the crime scene was being cleaned. This was an obvious attempt to erase any trace of their involvement in the cover-up. In addition, during a search of the Gledhill home, investigators found a Glock 19X gun box, exactly matching the description of the weapon Jennifer had shown her lover just days before the murder. It was wrapped in a child's onesie and stored in a plastic tote near Jennifer's bedroom. On October 24th, 2024, Jennifer's parents were arrested and charged with 4 counts of obstruction of justice. The investigation revealed that they had been involved in the efforts to conceal evidence, including the disposal of the mattress and the cleanup of the crime scene. Their attempts to cover up the murder only added to the tragedy, as they too became complicit in hiding the truth about Matthew's death. Thomas and Rosalie's arrests signified the final unraveling of the Gledhill family's web of lies. The depth of their involvement in helping Jennifer try to hide her crime only further darkened the case, revealing just how far some would go to protect their own. But even with Jennifer and her parents in custody, Matthew Johnson's body remained missing, an unhealed wound for his family, who were desperate for closure. The case of Jennifer Gledhill is one that will haunt those involved for years to come. Matthew Johnson's family, who had already lost him to the brutal violence of his wife, now faced the pain of not knowing where his body lay. The search for Matthew continues, with law enforcement and volunteers hoping that one day they will bring him home so his family can finally say goodbye. 3 children were left without both parents, one murdered and the other imprisoned. The emotional toll on these young lives cannot be overstated. They have been robbed not just of their father, but also of the safety and security that every child deserves. As Jennifer's trial looms on the horizon set for December 2025, the question remains, how could a mother who had everything to lose justify destroying so many lives for the sake of an affair? As we await Jennifer's trial, one thing is certain, justice will never undo the pain she has caused. Matthew Johnson will never come home, and his children will grow up without their father, a tragic loss that no amount of time will ever heal. The case serves as a chilling reminder of how deception, betrayal, and a single irreversible act can change the course of so many lives forever.